So a few little A format scores there. And now I'm off to meet my friend Trevor in the pub to talk about westerns. So the mobile phone signal in Bradford-on-Avon is terrible, and I'm supposed to be meeting my mate Trevor, and I've sent him about 6 texts, and I think we're slightly out of sync, to be honest. So what have I picked up? Well, I've got Trouble Is My Business, Raymond Chandler, Penguin, A format, and I used to have this. I bought my copy back in about 1983 and I got rid of it. I wish I'd always kept it. And it's short stories and they're really good from what I remember. I haven't read them for years. And I think they, let's see, I think some of these are, yeah, these are, God almighty. And these are John Dalmas stories, not Philip Marlowe ones. And I think in some later editions of Chandler, they changed the name to Philip Marlowe, which is really naughty. But I remember enjoying these a lot. And these are sort of like the Black Mask era, 1930s and things. Let's have a look. They appeared in various American magazines between 1933 and 1939. There you go. So I'm looking forward to reading that again, because it's been years since I've read Chandler and I was really missing this, and I love that cover. Something I've been trying to pick up is the old Granada Grafton Doris Lessing SF series and Cannabis in Argos. And let's see, I'm trying to think what order they go in. But anyway, we've got The Making of the Representative for Planet 8 and The Sentimental Agents in the Volyan Empire. Now if I can get these in A format with unbroken spines, which is going to be a bit of a job, then that'll stop me from going after the hardcovers in Cape because they're more expensive. I've got one of them, but I'd actually prefer to have them in these because I remember these liveries really well. So we shall see. So that's 2 out of 5 done. So back from the pub, me and Trev had a couple of pints and discussed plans to go to Italy next year. Oh yes. And I just thought I've got a few things here which I picked up. This will be a piecemeal video. Tomorrow I'm off to Westbury to Zardos, All You Need Is Books with Jules Burt, and you'll probably see that before you see this. But you know, there are various things coming in the mail and coming into the shop which I will be showing you. So we'll take a look at things I've also picked up besides those few things you've just seen. Right, well, I think I mentioned on the community page I did my Ripley video, which I wish more people would watch, and I decided to pick up The American Friend on Blu-ray, and I watched it last night. And that was the 4th time I've seen it, and I never liked it before apart from Bruno Ganz's acting, but I really enjoyed it last night and I think it's a really good film. Dennis Hopper as Tom Ripley is not the ideal Ripley, but if you look at it just as a film and not as a film adaptation, then you can do it really well with it. I really recommend it, and the colours in the picture, just fantastic, brilliant stuff. Recommended. But do read the novel Ripley's Game first, okay? What else have we picked up? Well, something that's a bit of a craze these days amongst paperback collectors, and this is all Nicholas Royal's fault, of course, is Picador collecting. And I was in work the other day and a friend of mine said to me, which is the only Picador with a white spine? And of course I said, well, the Picador classics are black spines. And he said, no, but there was one which didn't have a white spine. And I was thinking, what the devil was that? And of course it's one that I used to have. And he said, it's this book, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, by Ken Kesey, originally published in 1962. This is the Picador film tie-in. It had this jacket for about 20 years and I used to have one, got rid of it, and it's one of those things you wish you hang on to. It's one of those films I saw so many times I don't really want to see it anymore. It's not a bad novel, it's quite a good novel actually, really, if I'm honest. And I picked this up, absolutely beautiful. And that was £3.50. I got that in Market in Bath, I think. So I snapped it up because it's very, very uncommon. So even if I pass it on, it's a great one to have. And there's old smiling Jack there, not long before his turn in The Shining. Speaking of cinema, we're in a kind of cinematic mode at the moment. Something I'm reading at the moment, I've just bought this, is Cinema Speculation by Quentin Tarantino. This came out in paperback about 3 or 4 weeks ago. It was a hardcover way back. When was it? Was it before Christmas? Yeah, it was before Christmas. I can't think it was Christmas or the Christmas before, but it was a good while ago. Always wanted to read it, just reading it at the moment. Very good, actually. If you like things like Easy Riders, Raging Bulls, it's good. And he writes about all sorts of 70s cinema, very enjoyable. Quentin, very good writer, has to be said. Something I picked up for Mr. Jules Burt, which I'll be giving to him, and you'll probably see this on his channel. This is still sealed. I got this from Galleria, the magazine shop in Bath, where they have all sorts of amazing zines. And I think that's in my last Bath walkabout vlog a while ago. And this is Brand Balance, which is a magazine, and it's, I'm not sure what country it's from, but it comes out every now and again, and it does like a different brand in each one, like it's an IKEA, for example. And this is about penguins. So I got this for Jules because he loved it. This was £22.50. Shocking. But McGallery is specialist stuff, so he's going to love that. So you'll probably see that on his channel. Also in the Ripley-esque mode, I said in the video that I really wanted to sort of pick up first editions where I could, or at least the uniform editions. And I got around the other day to buying this one, the 5th book in the sequence, Ripley Underwater, in this UK hardcover first from Bloomsbury. And this was about £16. And a nice glassine wrap. And I remember selling this when it first came out in 1991, so I'm pleased to get that. I wonder what the postman will bring next. Sunday, a lazy day, hopefully, working like mad yesterday and the day before. What have we got? A few more things have come my way. I tend to stack these up in the format, the smallest books on the top. It's the obvious thing to do, I know. So we're starting with a non-SF book. This is something I picked up. This is unusual because this is a Penguin Modern Classic, which are normally in B formats. And you know I'm obsessed with book formats. And this is actually in an A format, and I cannot work out why. And it's got a different, and it has a different cover to the standard B format. And again, I'm thinking, is it an export edition? It doesn't appear to be. It's only £7.99, which is nice and cheap. And this is James Baldwin, Giovanni's Room. I've never read Baldwin. He would be on my list of shame if I had such a thing. And of course, he was black and gay, and is supposed to be brilliant. So I decided to pick this up because it's an A format, because I'm trying to buy A format books as much as I can to keep it going, because it's such a beautiful format. Then some more things I got on eBay from somebody who has old stock from a printer, but it's old new stock. It's never sort of been out in the wild. It's just sat there. And these books were about £3 a pop. This is somebody who I don't think I've ever read. I might have read 1 or 2 short stories. I do have an anthology edited by her, and this is Pamela Sargent, The Golden Space, and there she is on the back, looking quite cool there. And this is Timescape Books. This is odd because I say I got these from a guy who, you know, is at a printer, so had them from printers, but this was not from the same batch. This is an American book, and this has actually seen some action, and it's a collection of, let me see, it's a collection of novellas, I think. Let's have a look at it. Yeah, 5 novellas, and it seems to be, yeah, I think it's actually a fix-up for novellas, and it's about immortality. Interestingly, it has a little indicator in the front, a little post-it note, which makes me think that it might have come from Andy Richards or Cold Tonnage originally, because Andy tends to do that with his stuff, and it's not new, as I say. Let's have a look. Quarter bound, which is quite nice, yellow and blue cloth. So that's somebody to sort of cross off my list. And that reminds me of my friend Les Escott, who used to run Morrigan Books, and he always said it would be nice to have read a science fiction book by everybody who ever published science fiction of any note. So that's a big sort of undertaking. But something I did get from that chap, which was on his list there, was this, the Gollancz Book of Horror, Dark Terrors 4, and this was the 4th in a series of 4. and it's edited by Stephen Jones, who I do know, I have met, and he was at the Vintage Paperback Fair, nice chap. And these sort of came out, I think, let's see, 1990s? Let's have a look. Is it 1990s? Let's just see. 1998, and this is the only one I've got. And I do like short horror stories. I am quite a traditionalist in my horror. I don't read a huge amount. If I've read a fair whack in my time, I tend to prefer short stories to novels, and it's got all sorts of great names in it. And those names include, let's see, all sorts of great people. Just have a look. Richard Christian Matheson, the son of Richard Matheson. Christopher Fowler, who's no longer with us, who's a heck of a nice chap. Neil Gaiman, Ramsey Campbell, Stephen Baxter doing a horror story. David J. Shaw, who's one of the splatterpunk people from the 90s. Dennis Etchison, who I like. Poppy Z. Bright, who I haven't read for years and years and years. Joel Lane, Thomas Tessier, Lisa Tuttle, Conrad Williams, Michael Marshall Smith, a few other names I don't know, so it'd be good to read some of the people I don't know. And really lovely books. Say this was like £3, so you can't really go wrong, really. Fantastic stuff. Then, this is a gift which I received in the mail, and it was on my Amazon wish list, and somebody's bought it for me. And usually when you have something on an Amazon wish list, you get a little flyer inside telling you who it's from and a message, but this didn't have one. But I think that's because this is an American title and it came from the States and they don't do that. And this is Dimensions of Sheckley, the selected novels of Robert Sheckley in the glorious Nesfer edition. And I do love Nesfer. I got quite a bit of Nesfer stuff. Fantastic. And this is really great, actually. I do like Sheckley a lot. And it's prompted me to think about a video which I have wanted to make. 2 videos, actually. One I've thought about doing. Another one, it hadn't sort of come to me till this popped through. It's got a great introduction by Mike Resnick. And fundamentally, this has got some of the great novels in here. It opens with Immortality Inc., which was filmed as Free Jack. Dreadful, dreadful film. And I think that was the first Sheckley I read, and I read it in the Penguin Sheckley Omnibus a very long time ago. That's a short novel, and that was first published in 1958. Then you get Journey Beyond Tomorrow from 1963, the year I was born, which I haven't read since the 80s. It's one of his most celebrated books, also known as Journey of Jonas. Really good stuff. And that's the one which reminds me the most of Vonnegut, actually, when I read it at the time. Then you get Mind Swap from 1966, which wasn't one of my favourites, but I need to go back to it, so we'll see. Then it finishes with a double whammy of Dimension of Miracles, which is probably Sheckley's most acclaimed book. Not essentially my favourite. I like it a lot, and it's pretty much the one that inspired Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And it finishes with a novella called Minotaur Maze, which was published by Pulp House, which was like a hardcover magazine, and Christine Catherine Rush was involved with that. And Christine Catherine Rush, she was very much like the poster girl in Locus in the 90s. You know, whenever you'd buy an issue of Locus, the science fiction newspaper, there'd be a picture of Christine Catherine Rush in it because she was regarded as quite toothsome. So she was in there all the time, you know. She writes crime novels now, I think. One of my customers told me their crime novels are really good. So that's a really amazing collection. I've not read that final novella. It's one of the last ones. Great stuff. So this has prompted me to make 2 videos, which you'll see on the channel, hopefully before too long. Fantastic. And whoever sent it to me, I don't know, please let me know. By now I may know, because I did put a mention it on the community page. But as always with Nesfer, really good production quality, amazingly well edited and selected. Just great, great stuff. Beautiful. So that's for the permanent collection. Absolutely lovely. Then, just to finish this little tranche, will this be the last bit of this collector diary? It's hard to say really, because I'm not planning on buying anything for a while. It'll depend. So maybe this will be the last segment. We'll have to see. This was something that Morris at Zardoz gave me, which I didn't show in the book haul, which you will have seen from about a week ago, 10 days ago. And I was talking to him about how I was enjoying Western films, and also looking at the novels and think about the history of the United States. And Morris knows quite a lot about history, and he used to teach. And he gave me this. This is the Longman History of the United States by Hugh Brogan, and very handsome. I think you'd agree, absolutely lovely. And I've been selling this for years because this in paperback is called The Penguin History of the United States. It's Penguin in paperback, and it's the definitive standard work on US history and has been for a long time. Beautiful, beautiful stuff. And I remember when I started working in a very large bookshop, the largest bookshop I ever worked in, we just moved in there and we bought loads and loads of great stock. We bought things which are not in print anymore, obviously. Wonderful stuff. This is one of the books we had, so it really took me back. And I have flicked through it. So that's going to be my big history read when I get around to it. I'm in the mood. So thanks again, Morris, for that. It's fantastic. So will this be the last tranche? I don't know, really. We'll see. Another day, another collector diary entry. And instead of showing you books I've just bought, I'm going to show you some books I've just read or reread in one case and talk about some other things generally. And I am finding, as you will have noticed, I am finding science fiction, or rather the culture around science fiction, as it is at the moment, somewhat irksome. And this happens to me periodically. I've had long periods where I've stepped away from SF because I think nothing's going on, or it's going in a terrible direction. And generally over the last 30 years, yes, over the last 30 years, so it's not something that I've come into as an old guy. It was something I thought way back in my early 30s, that SF was actually dead, that it had stopped moving forward, that it stopped evolving, there were no more revolutions, and it was pretty much done. And I've talked about this a bit, but I'm going to do something soon which really looks at the way SF developed and why I think that's the thing now again, because I keep posting those sort of videos and doing them. And of course, a lot of people subscribe and they don't watch the backlist. So if you've just subscribed, watch the backlist, please, because a lot of the theoretical framework is there and you won't get that on other channels in the same way. It's referred to here on and off constantly. When I say words like novum, then you think, what is he on about? You need to look back at the theoretical videos. Anyway, a few things to address. Something which really irked me yesterday, and I made a couple of comments on a couple of YouTube channels, is people doing new wave videos and including things like Roadside Picnic. And, you know, the Strugatsky brothers were behind the Iron Curtain. You know, they weren't part of the Anglo-American thing. And New Wave was Anglo-American. It was a transatlantic thing. There were two new waves. There was the taboo-breaking sensationalist side in the States under Harlan Ellson's sort of tutelage with Dangerous Visions. And in the UK, there was, you know, the real thing under Moorcock's editorship of New Worlds. And, you know, if there are two definitive new wave writers, they would be William S. Burroughs, who pointed the way forward, merging modernism with SF, and J.G. Ballard, who said that, you know, the future will be boring. And boy, he was right. And also saying that inner space, not outer space, was the problem. And here we are 60 years on, and people are still obsessed with spaceships. You know, it's a little bit sad, really. But then, you know, they do have their charm, as M. John Harrison said when I interviewed him. But really, I think, again, if you're wondering what New Wave is, have a look at my New Wave top 10s on this channel. There'll be more discussion of that. There's a particular video coming up soon looking at one author who's really key in that respect. Something I saw on another channel was a video about how 75% of young adult readers in the UK are not young adults. They're over 18. Well, yeah, this is no surprise to those of us working in the book trade, because, of course, what you're seeing now is arrested development. And this particular commentator went on to say that he'd read an article, I think it was in The Guardian, about this, talking about how, you know, maybe it was a response to the way the world is these days, that people wanted to sort of stay young longer, and, you know, which is basically an escapist argument. And I completely get that, but at the same time, as I say about SF, it is the business of the future to be dangerous. What I've actually seen in my job as time has gone on is that since YA became a thing in the UK about 25 years ago, and it's developed since then, really, the fact is that what it's doing, in my opinion, is holding young people back from reading the sort of things the young people would have read in their late teens and early 20s when I was younger. And they discovered, you know, Penguin Modern Classics. They read Beat Generation writers. They read all sorts of things. And I'm not saying they have to read books from the 1950s, but the fact is that young people would engage with modernism. They'd even do it through SF in their teens, the work of people like Philip K. Dick. And, you know, now people are they're sort of still reading like children in their late 20s, a lot of them. And this commentator came up with the old comment, which always comes up when you bring these arguments up, which is, oh, I'm glad to see the people are at least reading. Well, that's all very well and good, but do we want a literate society, an illiterate society, or an illiterate society, a society where people can read, but they don't really read very much, and what they read, isn't that great? And yeah, it's subjective. It's what you want to do. I'm happy for people to read what they like, but at the same time, the fact is this, is if you stay on a fairly lowest common denominator level, you don't get the real joy of literature that comes to with things which are a bit more sophisticated and flavoursome and interesting and stimulating. And I think the problem with SF now is that we've got a couple of long established sort of classic authors, two of the big three, have faded away quite a lot. Clark's faded away a lot. Heinlein is largely out of print in the UK with a few exceptions. People are still obsessed with Asimov, especially the clunky early stuff that you get in iRobot and Foundation. The better stuff comes later. And, they're reading Dune because the film things, and people are coming into this, young people are coming into these books, which are really old, and they're not really well-written books. They've got good ideas, and they have their place, but they're not great literature. They're not things which will really push you forward and get you thinking in sophisticated ways. And we always have the problem with that stuff that we've had since its dawn, since it was named in 1925, that it's been in competition with more accessible mass media, that it's been in competition with film and TV. And now, of course, you look at films now, science fiction films now, and they look like computer games. People think this is great, but it's all surface and no depth. It's incredibly surface-based. And I remember watching Blade Runner when it first came out, and I thought, wow, from now on, science fiction films, the bar's going to raise, the effects are there, and we're going to have really good, thoughtful things, which also look amazing as well. And of course, it didn't happen. It just didn't happen. So there we go. So we've got a culture obsessed with surface and escapism. And, this whole thing about people wanting to stay young and avoid the sort of horrors of the real world. I mean, one of the things about SF is that, it can prepare you for it. You won't essentially know what to do. But the prescience of it and the way that it tackles the dystopian corpus is very, very much a thing where, nothing will come as a surprise for you. So at least you'll be psychologically prepared. So, I think there's a conflict there between escapism, as always, and a real desire for one's mind to be challenged and provoked. And that's what I'm interested in, the provocation of the mind, really. Anyway, enough about that. Crime fiction. I have said recently, and I have been thinking more and more, am I done with crime fiction? And interestingly, Matt at Bookpilled has said when he's read crime fiction, he isn't really interested in the whodunit aspect, the plotting, the Gordian knot, the puzzling and all that. And I've got to be honest, so am I. It's not usually the sort of crime fiction I read. So I do have a couple of crime novels here, which I've had for a while, and I bought last year. They're both Japanese. First of all, Tokyo Express by Saiko Matsumoto, and it's in a Penguin Modern Classic, very slim book, beautiful cover as you see, and I was drawn to this because of its brevity. I like short, sharp, flavoursome books. I don't essentially think it's all about having wasted words. I think it's a question about cutting to the chase and painting beautiful pictures with words. And, you can do that in a big book, but it's more likely in a small one that's well wrought. So many novels now should really be short stories, but people don't like short stories. They like something they can get into. I want something that's really, really speaks to me. And I had a go at this, and it's interesting up to a point. It has that slight Japanese flavour. It's basically about two detectives. One's provincial, one's in Tokyo. The provincial one is an old guy. The young guy is the guy in Tokyo. And there's what appears to be a double suicide on a beach. And both of them think, there's something wrong with this. It's not essentially a double suicide. They decide to investigate. And it's fundamentally about train timetables. And you learn a lot about the geography of Japan, which is nice. And it's very elegantly done, and the writing is absolutely fine, but it is basically a puzzle to solve, and it goes through various levels of deductive reasoning. And I read it in 2 sittings, and it's brief, but it confirmed for me that it doesn't matter how well those things are written, I'm really not that interested unless it broadens out into a more character study, which you get in things like Schwal and Walu, the Martin Beck series. So that was a no for me, and will go on the sell pile, even though it's a beautiful Penguin modern classic, because life is short and space is even shorter. Then I read this, Edogawa Rampo, Beast in the Shadows. And Edogawa Rampo, that's a Japanese transliteration of Edgar Allan Poe, Edogawa Rampo, you get it? And that wasn't his real name, of course. His real name was Taro Hirai. And he was really big in Japan, and small book, as you see. I read this in 1 sitting. It's 96 pages, ideal, so it's a little novella, great cover. And it begins with a first-person narrative by a crime writer. And he says there's 2 types of crime writers. There are the ones who are basically interested in the psychopathology of the villains, of the murderer, what have you. And then there's the ones who are basically detectives. It's about solving the puzzle. And the guy says, I'm the latter. And he looks into a former. And it's interesting up to a point. This is much better to me than this. This is more to my taste. This has the sort of cruelty and perversity that I tend to expect from modern Japanese fiction, because, of course, I started reading it with Mishima and Dazai way back in the 80s. And, you know, there are flashes of Poe, the man who invented detective fiction, and it's entertaining up to a point. But again, it comes down to one of these twisty whodunits, and whodunits are not for me, so it goes on the sell pile. You know, he's an important figure. He wrote a book called Black Lizard, and Penguin have issued his book Black Lizard in this livery and format. And Vintage Black Lizard, the US crime imprint, which started in the 80s, is named after that book. But it confirmed to me that the last thing I want to spend the rest of my life doing is read crime novels, which are basically puzzles. I'm not interested. I've done it. I've been there. It's not enough for me. I need the existentialist portrayal of anti-heroes and the great sort of build-up of ensemble casting. You're getting good police procedurals like Schwal and Walu, which is why I have my hopes pinned on Ed McBain, really, when I read the ones I bought in Hay a few months ago. Interestingly, Penguin started this line, and the guy at Penguin who said he was going to do it, they started off last September, and he did 10, then another 10. He said that he was going to bring about 500 of these into print. And I have to say, at least where I work, we haven't sold that many. I think they look too old school for most contemporary readers. I don't think there are really that many hardcore crime readers out there, you know, who are sort of like dig into every corner. The British crime reader tends to be fairly conservative, tends to like the body in the library, and there's a lot of international stuff in this. There's a lot of noir-y stuff, a lot of American stuff, lots of great books, most of which I've already read. But I'm not so sure that this series will continue, because there hasn't been another tranche of 10. I think they're going to fold. So there you go. Shame, because they look rather nice. It's a pity, but that goes in the sell pile too. As you also know, I have been reading mainstream novels more due to my dissatisfaction with contemporary SF. And I decided to go way, way back to a book which I read in the 1980s, which was recommended to me by a friend. And I let it go. That's Ask the Dust by John Fante. Now, if you look on YouTube, there's lots of videos about this saying how brilliant it is. And I was recommended John Fante, who was a 1930s, 1940s Los Angeles writer. I was recommended him by an older friend I was working with, and I got into Charles Bukowski, and Bukowski does a introduction to this. And this is about a young Italian-American writer living in poverty in Los Angeles who sold one story, and he wants to sell more, and he's slightly self-aggrandizing. He's kind of afraid of women to a degree, but the writing is really lovely, and it was a long time since I read it. When I first read this, it's one of a sequence of 4 books. This is the third, and the first one is called Wait Until Spring Bandini, and they're autobiographical novels, and it's about this character, Arturo Bandini, who's based on John Fante when he's a small guy, little guy, and his father, who is a tradesman of some sort. He falls in love with a rich woman he's doing work for, and it was very worthy. It was quite dull, and my friend said, no, you should read Ask the Dust, and I read this. And it's good, But I got to a certain point with it where I felt it skirted around a lot of the feelings and it should have been more direct. But if you're interested in Charles Bukowski and you haven't read this, you should. I won't read it again. I didn't enjoy the second half as much as the first half. And, you know, it's the sort of thing which a while ago I would have kept, having rebought it, but I just don't have the space. And, you know, life is getting shorter and I'm trying to make decisions about what I'm going to reread. I always thought that when I retire, which is probably due 5-6 years time, that I would reread all my favourite books. But I'm finding the need for stimulus from new material. And, you know, that's partially a thing where when I retire, I want to stop buying books, just read what I've got. And I probably will sell some to fund some holidays and, you know, and life generally, because you don't get rich as a bookseller. It's that simple. So I am at a crossroads with that, and I'm going to get rid of more stuff soon and be careful what I buy. So this will probably be the last collector diary for some time. The next one will be probably a tranche of new books, because where I am with my work, I'm coming to a stage where you get a loyalty award every few years, and I'm due to get a loyalty award, which comes in the form of effectively what to you would be like a book token. So I've got a pile of books ready to buy, and they're mostly weird fiction, general fiction, some SF, a couple of other things, bits and bobs, and I'll show those to you. So you'll see a book haul coming up, which will be lots of new stuff. And by new, I mean not secondhand. Some of the books will be old, some will be recent. And they're mostly the things that I really want to read this year, authors I want to try, authors I want to read more by, so that'll come. There will be a couple more dealer visits this year. I'm thinking I'm going to do 2 more, and then I think I'm going to quit them, because really I look at my wants list, and if I go to dealers, I buy lots of other stuff because on impulse as I see it. So I want to cut down to the wants list and kind of finish that off really over the next 2 years and sort of go from there really. So that's Collector Diary, episode 20. Hard to believe, isn't it? So as you see, there is some existential dread. There is some uncertainty. What am I going to do next? I'm actually going to devote a couple of weeks just to reading probably 3 or 4 books by authors I really like. Books which I haven't read by favourite authors. There'll be familiar names to you, one of them less so. So probably in about a fortnight's time, I hope to do a review video. It'll probably nearly all be SF or in the environs thereof, just to talk about some of my favourites, because I'm really missing those people from my reading experience. So that'll be the next thing up, and I hope you have a great week. When am I going to put this video up? It's probably going to go up after some other ones which are scheduled. You'll probably see this in a week's time. Today is actually the 20th of May. You'll probably see this at the beginning of June. Hope it's nice weather where you are. Signing out for now. Bye.